sold,
Right.
capacity. I mean,
Yep.
we were looking at, which ones were the best value, where could we increase the market? Yeah, and I think we left some of the stable ones alone, thinking
Well,
those were like the bread and butter.
right. Well, Angela, you're not far off in that type of decision making. So you're okay. You're okay going that way, but you need to go farther. Okay. So to repeat those three areas that I was talking about, I'm now recording, guys. The three areas that you really want to look at here would be, first of all, are we meeting the buying criteria? And that's really, really important because that determines whether or not that product that you have is matching the needs of that consumer. And needs, that's that nasty four-letter word that we have in business. That's the thing that really drives that consumer. The consumer is not going to buy your product or use your service unless it meets or best meets their needs. So you want to make sure that you're as close to meeting those buying criteria as you possibly can. Now, I know that's a challenge because there's several different levers you have to pull to get close to matching that circle, right? You guys probably have moved it around a little bit and you're going, well, I'm not quite there. So you have to kind of play with that to make sure that you're in that bottom right quadrant. So when that circle does move down to the bottom right, your product is right there to match the needs of that consumer. So that's number one. Does that help answer a question, first of all, Angela, with what we're doing on part number one?
Exactly. The circle moving down to the bottom right makes so much more sense now.
Right, because that circle does move. That and it really aligns with what goes on in industries. We know that customers' buying preferences always change, don't they? We always want the latest, greatest, best thing. We want the fastest technology. We want the one that stores the most information on it. We want the one that, we want that kind of advancements in our technology. And remember, what you're selling here is technology. You're selling technologically related products. Now, number two, once we feel comfortable that we've positioned our products to capture that movement of that circle that's going down and to the right, now we need to make sure that we can market and promote that. And under your marketing, there's, you have those different expenses or those different values you can put in to promote or market your products. So make sure that you attend to that. Now, one of the things about marketing and promotion and spending money there is it's really kind of a fine line on not spending enough and spending too much. You want to make sure that you're spending where you're going to capitalize on your return on investment. And in strategy, it's called, it's actually a curve, and it's a curve that shows a diminishing return. Your return on investment goes up when you increase your marketing to a point that at some point, if you're putting too much marketing and promotion in, spending too much money, it's not going to cover that return on investment. So it has a diminishing arc to that. So we want to make sure that we're staying within, and it's called a strategic budget is what it's really called. All right, so that's two. Third thing. The third thing now is our internal processes. Two areas where we can save there. One is through automation. That reduces our labor costs. So if you increase your automation, so let's say on low end, as an example, Andrews right now is at a 4.9 on automation. If they were to increase their automation up to, and I'm just going to give an example here, a 9, they would notice that their labor costs, which would be right here, would most likely drop down to about a $2 labor cost per unit. So you can see how automation then can have an effect on reducing that labor cost. Now, yes, Zach.
So for automation, wouldn't that be a big initial cost because you'd have to buy for the machines to automate it, but then obviously over time it'd pay for itself?
Well, you're right. And also adding to that, Zach, is that there's a time element to that too. Low and traditional takes less time to initiate the automation than it does high performance and size. And it's less
Okay.
money for the low and traditional for automation than it is for high performance and size. Angela, you have a question?
You just touched on primary segment, and we weren't quite sure what the traditional low, high, and what's PFMN.
Performance.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a performance measurement coordinate is what that is. Yeah, this one right here. Right. Okay. Now one more thing that reduces your costs, and that would be TQM, total quality management. Now with total quality management, what we're looking at is really an internal cost again. And that really applies to the processes that are being used in the manufacture and delivery of that particular product. So with total quality management, what we're doing is reducing the process time, which also reduces our costs, and it increases our quality, which makes our product then more attractive. Attractable is not even a question, more attractive to our consumers out there, helps us with our sales. All right. Now talking about inventory and overproduction. So you see here with Baldwin, they had 139% of plant utilization. So they had 39% of overtime. With that 39% of overtime, they had produced 1,985 units. They sold every one of them. Next time around, they're going to have a capacity of 2,000. And the demand for low end is going to, let's see if we can tell you here. The low end market is going to, next segment growth rate is going to be 11.7%. So if the last one was 10,000, you're going to add another 11% to that for the whole industry. And depending on how much of the industry Baldwin was selling, and it looks like about 44% of that, they can kind of calculate if we still sell around 44% of this market share, and the volume this next period is expected to go up by 11% from 10,000, we can then kind of get an idea of how many units we'll be able to sell on the low end, given the fact that our product matches the buying criteria that that customer is expecting. All right, am I helping or hurting with some of these answers here? Is it making any sense, Zach? I notice you got a smile on your face.
I mean, it comes and goes. Like some stuff makes more sense. Some stuff I just get more questions, but I'm learning, you know?
Okay, good. Does anybody else have any questions right now? All right. You'll get it, guys. I promise you, you will get it. You will get it going forward. In fact, I was actually very pleasantly surprised. I noticed that of the whole class, there was only one person that didn't finish the tutorial. And whoever, I don't remember who it was, but it's not done. You guys can still, that person can still submit that into the tutorial and get your grade. But you guys all did really, really well on the tutorial. So you're getting it. You're getting this information here.
I have a question.
Sure.
So on the tutorial, 3 more of them popped up.
Yeah, you only had to answer 3, Robert.
Okay, yeah, no, I did the 3, but what I'm saying is this week, 3 more of them popped up.
Well, you don't have to worry about them. You're done
Okay.
with the tutorial. Yeah, all done.
Thank you.
Yep. Now, one more thing before we move forward. Did each of the teams finish their financial assessment of their firm and also their initial strategic direction of their firm? Did you guys finish that?
No.
Okay. If you didn't,
No.
no big deal. Just, when you do, try and get it in this next week, okay? Just send it to me email. And I want to make sure you guys get the extra, the points for that. You get 25 for the financial and 25 for the, strategy. Yeah, Angela, question.
That's as a group, right? Like, just like
I-
we did round one? Okay.
Total group. And actually, now that I got you on Capstone Courier, I'm going to go to reports. And I'm going to go to annual report. Let's go back here. Let's see here. And let's just do view round one. There you go. There's your balance sheet for Andrews. And so the financial information can kind of come from here. Okay. And you've already made your first round decisions, so you kind of know which direction you're going to go. So on your, the second part of that paper, if you're happy with the direction that you were proceeding in, going, and both Andrews and Baldwin, you guys were making money. Actually, with Chester and Digby, you did too. Then you can write up what you think your strategy is going to be going forward. And we'll use that, okay? All right. I think I covered what I need to cover. Well, okay, one more thing. We got to capitalize this. You're going to have to find resources, specifically money, to try to capitalize your investments here. So my question to you guys is what's the direction you're going to take? How are you going to go about capitalizing your strategic plan? We got some options here. We've got a bond that you can issue. You've got stock that you can sell. And of course, there's a loan that you can always take out, both short-term and long-term loans. So any thoughts on whether one is better than the other, or pros and cons of each? Anybody have any ideas on what they might want to consider? Now, I don't want to give away your strategy. So if you,
Yeah, I would think
Yeah.
issuing, and this is just, like I said, it's kind of a guess more than anything, like issuing stock would be better than taking out loans.
well, okay. Plus and minus on that. What do you think, Zach? Anybody else? Plus and minus about issuing stock versus taking out loans? I mean, Zach has a good point. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to issuing stock. You issuing stock right now, obviously, you don't make any payments on that. There's no loan payment, right, Zach? So if you issue
Yeah,
stock,
that was like my logic behind it.
right, yeah, sure. And Zach, if you issue stock right now, let's see where your stock was issued here, or what your number was. Let's go back up here. Zach, are you Andrews, or where are you?
Yeah, we're Andrews.
Okay, so you issue stock at 34.43. Okay. So you sell out, oh, I don't know, 1 million shares. So you got some money now that you can work with, and you grow your company, and now your stock price closes at $134.43. Well, buying that stock back right now is going to cost you a fortune, right? Now, you don't have to buy it back. All you have to do is issue dividends, to keep your shareholders happy. So the plus of that is that you're getting cash that you're not having to make payments on. The downside is that if you do really, really well and your stock goes up, which you intended to do, if you ever want to try and buy it back, that stock then is going to cost you more money than what that initial amount was that you were taking out.
Yeah, okay.
So that's one downside. Christopher, you have a question?
I was gonna say, by issuing stocks too, you leave yourself vulnerable to someone taking over your company,
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
or by a competitor buying you out and you becoming the manufacturer for them.
Wow, Chris, you're talking about hostile takeover, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Yeah. And actually what Christopher's talking about is a strategy that is used in business a lot of times. Sometimes there will be companies that will have a lot of shares that are still outstanding, that are available for sale, that are shares that would have input into the company direction. So they're not just a common share. And what another company will do in a hostile takeover situation is they'll approach a bank and they'll say, what we want to do is we want to buy up this company. We want to use the assets of that company as our collateral. And then what we're going to do is buy up the remaining shares of stock, and then we will get control. So they're actually buying the company using that company's assets. That's a hostile takeover. And it happens if companies aren't careful of how vulnerable they are with the amount of shares that they have out there. Good point, Chris. Nice job. Wow, I've got a good class here. I have a really good class here. All right, I'm going to move now to our lecture. You guys okay with that? We're going to talk about 2 chapters tonight. The first one is the introduction of strategy. And then the second one is going to be the external analysis of the firm. Chris, you got a question?
Yeah, before we move on, I want, can you go over the pros and cons of getting bonds?
Oh, sure.
Purchasing
Sorry
bonds.
about that. Actually, in this particular case, let me see if they're. Now, your bonds here are due every 2 years, aren't they? Well, in some cases, 5 years, right? So we are at right now well, this is kind of a strategy here. Year 23. So year 23. So that means next session, year 24, there's going to be some bonds that are going to be due. So Andrews, Baldwin, Chester, Digby. One of the things that's going to come out of your bank account next time is going to be a $6.9 million bond that's going to be due. So make sure you account for that. So either issue some stock or issue another bond so that you've got enough money to take care of that particular bond payment, or else Big Al is going to have a loan that he's going to issue you, which is going to be a high interest loan. Now, so back to what I was talking about, Chris, about these bonds. They have a certain date in which that bond is callable. Baldwin, yours is going to be 33. Now, if I remember correctly, this advances 22, 23, 33, 30. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sessions, 8 sessions. So last session would be 2029, right? Going forward?
Correct.
Correct. So in other words, Baldwin, that bond you issued for 2023 call date, when do you have to pay that back? There's my point. Now, we know in real life you would have to pay it back, but in simulation game time, are we going to ever see a 2033? Chris, are you going to see a 2033?
No, that just, it's a loophole.
So in other words, I guess we could call that loophole free money, couldn't we?
So is Baldwin the only one that has a payment out to 2033?
Baldwin is the only one that issued a bond this last time, and that bond is callable on 2033, right? So this next time, if
They can repay that bond, right?
they don't have to, because this game ends in 2029. Right?
Right.
So they got free money, and then the team that started up another product got a full year's worth of product as well, right?
Oh, they will be getting a full year's of product. So right now you notice that there was no production on that particular product. So right now they had no units sold, no inventory. So their production is going to start here in February. So once their production starts, then they'll get basically 10 months worth of productivity out of that new product. And they really didn't even give us any information on what that product is. We don't know age, we don't know performance, we don't know size, we don't know pricing. We don't know anything about that new product. We just know that Baldwin's coming out with a brand new product. We don't know if it's going to be a traditional, low end, high end, whatever. So that was pretty smart move coming out with that without revealing a lot of the details on that as well. So yes, answer your question. Baldwin is going to get almost a full year's production on that new product that they're going to be introduced, that has been introduced. And the second thing here is that Baldwin, in issuing that bond that is callable in 2033, since the game ends in 2029 or maybe 2030, that won't be callable because the game's over.
So in theory, any of us can do a bond for 2033, correct?
Well, I think the next bond that you issue would be after 2033. So the next bond that you would issue, the next series that would come out, would probably have a maturity date on it, or a callable date of 2034 or 2035, which is clearly beyond the end of the game. Now, I didn't make the rules and I didn't set the parameters of this game. I mean, if it's there, play it, right?
So it's an advantage.
It's a total advantage, Angela.
Okay.
Complete advantage. It's like you're getting free money, Angela,
Yep.
right? So now the thing is that you got to talk to your team, see how much they want to get. And you don't have to stop there. You can issue another bond the next period too. So, all right, I'm sorry, Kenneth. I'm sorry, Kenneth, I shouldn't have said anything. Kenneth says it's a secret. Well, I just let the cat out of the bag, Kenneth. I'm sorry about that one here. All right, well, heck.
One more thing before you go to the lecture.
Sure.
Where do we do our financial assessment at? The work that you want us to?
Yeah, here we go. So I'm going to go up here to, I see where I have reports right here.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, actually right below here, you can go to the financial summary right there. And that will give you an idea of how well your firm is doing right there, their financial summary. Or you can go back up here to reports and you can look at then the annual report over there and go to round one and view. And there's your balance sheet, your cash flow, and your income statement for your firm. Okay, Angela?
Yeah. So is this something we just write up in a document?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's, you can say right now you've got $29 million worth of inventory. And of course, that inventory is going to cost you a little money. So you want to make sure that your inventory is down. Total assets, 117 million, which is a good thing. Just kind of review through this thing. Cash flow, it looks like you're projecting now an inventory reduction for this next period. Well, let's see. No, it went from 8.6 to 20. So you want to reduce that inventory. You did do some plan improvements, so you can kind of put that in there as, just go through this, kind of pick out some things and just add it to that little statement. And what I'm really looking for this whole thing is that you review the annual reports. That's really
right. And it'll train us to start reading, being able to read the data and understand it.
Yep, that's all I'm looking for, is that you've gone to the reports and you've read them. Okay. Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, from the simulation, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you have a lot of inventory, you want to invest a little bit in your marketing so that you can get that inventory out of there, right?
Right. Now, here's the thing about that. Let's talk about that. And that brings up another good point. You got to really, really, really be cautious that your inventory doesn't get stale. In other words, it's not too far out of that circle, that perceptual circle. Because what happens then, what happens when you have old technology, Even if you market it, it's not going to sell that well. It's like thinking of floppy disks. You can market the heck out of floppy disks. They're just not going to sell.
Or you gotta sell it so cheap that you're basically
Exactly.
losing money.
So you want to make sure that your products don't slip too far out of your perceptual map where you're not able to invest the money to move it back into where it is meeting that need again. So the perceptual map, you guys really got to stay on top of that for each one of your products. You don't want your products to slip out of that. You certainly don't want it to be at the backside of this circle. You want it to be right up here in the front bottom right in that side there, because this is going to move this way. It goes down and to the right. Okay, that help at all, Chris?
Yeah, so if we're projecting next year's inventory, it would kind of be safer to go on the lower end so that the inventory that we do have rolls over. Is that kind of what the mindset would be, this decision?
That's not a bad decision. That's not a bad decision. Now, make sure that you take into account what the inventory or what the industry is going to be doing as far as change in demand. You know, if the industry is starting to have an 11% increase in demand, make sure that you're accounting for that increase in demand so that you're not cutting yourself too short on not having enough inventory to sell.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered that one the best as that I could, other than the fact that make sure that you account for what that increased demand is going to be next year, allowing for what you currently have and allowing for your inventory, and then making an adjustment of how much more you might need to put in there for production. Chris, does that help?
It did, thank you.
Rosalinda, my gosh, woman, do you just work all the time on your homework? Is that what you do here?
Did
I
you
don't think you
notice?
have anything left to do.
Did you notice?
Oh, I certainly did notice.
Well, it's because, I have a busy schedule with mom, so I have to make sure I get everything in.
Yeah, I did
Um,
notice, by the way.
Well, I'm trying, Professor. Professor, a quick question. When we do our analysis, only because I'm crazy with papers, as you can tell, and with my style of writing and stuff, when we write up this analysis, you want it any particular format, just like have we been doing double space, APA format, or,
Nope,
include,
No format at all. I'm an
doesn't matter?
analyst. I'm an analyst. I just want you to give me the data.
So can we put in like Excel, like snapshots of Excel in there and do
Yep.
kind of stuff like that? Okay.
And you can do bullet points too.
Okay, I just want to ask, as as you've seen my
Sure.
stuff, I'm real picky. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. All right, are we ready to move over to the lecture, guys? All right, good. All right. Let's see if I can get this now. And share screen. All right, can you guys, hopefully you can see this. This would be,
Yep, we can see.
you got it? I'll be right back. I'm gonna turn the light on here. All right. It's starting to get dark on me. All right, what we're going to be talking about here in the first lecture here is just an introduction to strategic management. We're also going to be covering in this particular chapter the vision statement and mission statement of that firm, looking at goals and objectives, looking at tactics, defining what strategy is, and then how it kind of all comes together for an organization, the need for a good vision and mission statement, and determining what the goals and objectives are. And then once those have been determined, how then should we use our strategy to connect those goals and objectives to that mission and vision of that firm? So that's pretty much the basic part of what we're going to be looking at here. So we're going to define strategic management, the 4 different managerial actions. We're going to look at the different processes that occur within strategic management, starting with the vision and the mission, and looking then at the external and the internal environment, and then doing the analysis of what kind of resources and capabilities and competencies the firm has, and then coming up with a strategy, and then implementing that strategy, and then evaluating how well we're doing on that strategy. Those are generally those processes, and I'll show you the process steps here in just a minute. We're looking at the definitions and differences between the vision statement and the mission statement, and why they are so important for a firm when we're pursuing a strategy, making sure that there's an alignment between those areas of the firm, and then looking at goals and objectives and the different categories of objectives. So let's first of all define what strategy is. Well, simply what it is, it's management's plan for achieving a goal. That goal could be positioning that firm in such a way that it sells more products or provides more services than that competition. And the goal of that then is to improve that firm's financial and market performance. Now, strategy does a couple of things. It acts as a guide to those actions that the different functional areas of that firm need to undertake in order to support that strategy. And I think we basically talked about, and maybe we didn't, but basically talked about the functional areas of the firm and how important it is for those functional areas of the firm to support that strategy, that intended strategy. It's critical. Now, when we're talking about functional areas of the firm, what we're referring to would be the areas like HR, R&D, finance, operations, marketing, sales and service. Those are functional areas of the firm. And they're very, very important to that strategy. As an example, if a firm is intending to grow, and they're intending to grow in a new geographic area, marketing is going to be critical to that growth strategy. Marketing has to go and determine whether or not this new area that the firm intends to go to, first of all, those customers in that area, are they willing to buy that product? Do they need that product or that service? So we have to do some research having to do with the needs of that consumer. Secondly, we have to take a look at the competition, their pricing, their quality, their level of distribution. Third thing we have to look at is whether or not in that area, are there going to be incentives perhaps that might be required if we're a brand new entrant into that areas? Are we going to have to incentivize those buyers? Now, from this information, marketing is going to come back and they're going to give the information to the decision makers and say, well, it looks like our product that we're planning on selling in this area is going to be well positioned relative to the competition, and it's going to be something that that consumer needs. So from the marketing perspective, we think that that's a go. The strategy can move forward. Well, that's just one area of the functional group. Now you've got operations. Operations has to make that product and deliver that product. HR has to hire the people to make sure that they can work in that region. Accounting has to make sure that they've got the money for this strategic maneuver. So all of these particular functional areas need to be guided by that strategy. Additionally, strategy is a set of decision-making rules for guiding that total overall organizational behavior. How is this organization going to behave relative to growth strategies and relative to joint ventures or mergers or acquisitions? So it's going to be some set of guidance of organizational behavior for them. There's 4 different distinctive decision rules that are required as well with strategy. One thing is we need to have measurements. Strategy is difficult to determine whether or not it's successful without being measured. So you have to have metrics that measure the success of your strategy. So that's one area of decision-making rules. How well is your particular strategy performing? And those are really aligned by objectives. And the quantity of those objectives would be the goals of that firm. So there's our goals and objectives part, how it relates to strategy. The objectives define what it is that needs to be measured, and that quantity is the goals. We also have to determine with our strategy, what kind of product market type do we want? Are we going to be, where are we going to be selling our products? To who are we going to be selling our products? How are we going to be gaining an advantage in this particular area? So we have to determine what the product is, where we're going to sell it, who we're going to sell it to, and how are we going to gain an advantage in that particular product in that particular area. And of course, we talked about the organizational concept. That's the functional areas and how they work together or interrelate together to support that strategy. And then the day-to-day operating policies. These would be the tactics that would be used to support that strategy. Now, the tactics could be something simple like a promotional product supporting the marketing campaign. That would be like a play of the overall game that the firm is using in order for that strategy to achieve its objective and to meet its goals. So let's take a look at the different types of strategy. Now, we know things change all the time. We know in industry, there are conditions that are within the industry and exterior of the industry, those macro environmental conditions that have an effect on that industry's performance and then as well on that firm's performance. So even though we'll have an intended strategy, which is going to be a proactive strategy, you have to plan this. We're going to have our intended strategy. We know things happen. So the firm then is able to have also, or be able to also be a reactive strategy, being able to adapt to those environmental changing conditions. Things like advancing technology, new legal, political, social, environmental things that come in that'll have an effect on the industry and in those firms within that industry. So if we were to draw a little map on it, it would look something like this. You have that intended strategy, and then you have those emergent events that come in. And then from that emergent events and those intended strategies, you finally come out with what would be your realized strategy. I did mention that tactics are involved, and tactics then, because of the fact that a firm only has so much resources, they have to make sure that those resources are optimally utilized. Capacity, finance, workforce, numbers of people that are making strategic decisions. So you're limited, you're constrained with these things. So you want to make sure that what you're using to support your strategy is going to be used optimally. And that's what a tactic does. So tactics are the how-to part of that strategic equation. Tactics then are, first of all, the strategy is formulated by the senior management. Now, they formulate the strategy, but it's in conjunction with the functional managers in there as well. You want to make sure that you involve functional managers in that strategic formulation. They're the ones that will be able to advise senior management whether or not they are able to best support that intended strategy. Operations can say, yeah, this is what you want to do, but we just don't have the capacity right now to do that. So in order for us to support you, we need to have added capacity in our area to be able to achieve what your strategy is. Now, tactics are formulated then by those functional heads, those functional managers. And those functional managers pass the tactical approaches down to the junior level managers and employees for implementation. So a good example then of a tactic, this might be oversimplified, but it's a good example of what a tactic really does. So the strategy would be to take the river. That's our overall strategy. Well, the tactic, the how-to of taking the river would be use a boat. there's the how-to to take the river. So the tactic then of a marketing plan could be some promotion to achieve that marketing plan. Is this making sense, guys? Hopefully. Okay, good. Now, Sun Tzu, Chinese philosopher, says this: strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So in other words, what Sun Tzu is saying, that if you have a strategy, a plan without tactics, the how-to, your strategy is not going to be effective. Now, in this particular course, there are 5 major schools of strategic thought that we're actually going to be using. There's really 10 to 12 major strategic schools, but 5 of them are the most well-known and the most applied in business situations. So here are the 5 that we're going to be using. One is the design school. This design school methodology or theory looks at that formulation of strategy that is going to be achieved between the internal strengths and the weaknesses of that firm and the external opportunities and the threats facing that firm. That's just the SWOT analysis, is all that is. And it's used all the time in strategic formulation. In fact, it's one of the basic elements that a lot of the matrices come from, is the data that comes off of that SWOT analysis. Now, it might seem like a very, very simple tool. And in fact, when you think about it, it relatively is a simple tool. You're trying to identify within that firm, what are those strengths that the firm has, and where is the firm facing these weaknesses, and externally, what does the firm see as opportunities that they are able to exploit based on their resources and capabilities. And then finally, the threats. What kind of threats are facing this firm that can take advantages of our weaknesses? So those are the 4 areas of the SWOT. And we're going to be doing that. And I'm sure many of you guys have done a SWOT analysis, but our SWOT analysis is a little bit different in strategic management. Second area of strategic thought is the planning school. This was developed by the father of strategic management, H. Igor Ansoff. Actually, his area of strategy is called Ansoffian strategy. My doctorate is in Ansoffian strategy. It's a little bit more complex than Porter's strategy and the resource-based view strategy. It's highly, highly analytical. It follows a lot of steps and a lot of procedures and a lot of checklists that it goes through. It's very, very formalized in following and analyzing a firm to determine that firm's competitive strategic position. It does follow a lot of what was used in the design school. So we're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But this one adds to it something called a strategic posture. And that's the analysis of the firm to see whether or not that firm's posture, its capabilities and resources and management, its basic strategy infrastructure is able to match the environment in which it is competing. It also looks at the budgets, the programs, the operating plans. It looks at the turbulence assessment. Now, that might sound like a little strange thing here when we're talking about turbulence. We're talking about the external, that macro environment. Now, different industries compete in different macro environments. You can have some firms that compete in an environment that is relatively stable, that from year to year, very few changes occur within that macro environment that will have an effect on that firm. An example of that might be a sand and gravel company. They don't really have to worry about international law. They don't have to worry about societal issues much. Some of the things that they might have to worry about would be environmental. They don't have to really worry about technology. There's not going to be a great deal of technological changes that are going to affect how sand and gravel is processed. So relatively stable would be that industry when we're looking at this turbulence level. On the other side, though, you're looking at a firm that might be a global competitor. And a global competitor now has to deal with the laws and regulations of all of those different countries in which that firm is competing. So now you've got all of those different laws and regulations and societal influences and economic influences that come from all of those different countries. Adding to that, that type of industry is highly secretive. There are firms that are developing new drugs that I said that, didn't I? What did I say as an example? Was it pharmaceutical, right? I said pharmaceutical. Yeah. So you have then these companies that are developing new drugs, and they're not telling the other competitors out there what they're developing. It's to their advantage to keep that secret until it goes to final testing. And once it's in final testing, of course, then the other companies find to see it, they'll see what it is and realize that it's going to take them years and years and years to get to that point. And, by that time it's too late. So now we got would be considered surpriseful changes in an industry that are occurring as well. So now you got a more complicated industry. So the turbulence level there is going to be much higher than that sand and gravel industry. And so the strategy that Ansop's talking about, your strategy has to match the turbulence level of that environment in which you're competing. If you're competing in a highly turbulent level, your strategy has to be very, very, very aggressive. Whereas on the other side, it doesn't have to be aggressive. Strategic budget, I did mention that once, and that had to do with your marketing. What also applies to your strategy, and it also applies to your operations. There's 3 buckets that go into that strategic budget. And there's a formula that goes along with that. And basically what the formula is saying is that there needs to be a minimum amount in each one of those buckets that firm invests in operations, marketing, and strategy for that firm to break even. The minimum amount. If you don't put enough money into marketing, you're not going to make the sales. If you don't put enough money into operations, you're not going to have what's needed for optimal success. And if you don't put enough money in your strategy is going to fail. So you need to put a minimum amount in each one of those 3 buckets. Anything more than that, you get a higher return on investment up to a point. And that point, then there's going to be diminished returns. So that there's that range there above that break-even point, wherein your return on investment increases up to a point where it starts to diminish. And that's the strategic budget. The other thing that Ansop talks about is capability assessment. Now we're looking internally in that firm. What kind of capabilities does this firm have? Now, capabilities are those things that take the inputs, the raw material, the raw time, the raw labor, money, and they transfer those inputs to the outputs, the finished goods. These are the things that the firm does well, what we're very, very capable of doing. So what types of capabilities does that firm? We have to assess the level of capability. And then finally, change management. Now, we know as humans, we really don't like to go through change. In fact, we most typically resist change, especially if change is going to be negative to us. If it's going to cause us to have some sort of financial setback or some sort of positional setback or some sort of relocation setback, we're going to resist that change. Now, in order for a strategy to be optimally successful, one of the things that needs to be assessed within that organization is change management. And it comes in 2 areas. It comes behavioral and it comes systemic. What are the people going to do with this new strategy? Are they going to support the strategy or are they going to resist that strategy? We need to determine that. If they're going to resist it, we need to make sure that we change that resistance to at least a positive or something at least neutral before we move forward. Because if they resist our strategy then is going to be less than optimal. Systemic has to do with the systems that we have in our organization. That could be manufacturing. That could be the personnel that we have, the numbers of personnel. That could be the computer systems that we have. Maybe they're not capable of this growth strategy that we are pursuing. So it's not so much that the people are resisting, it's that the systems that we have currently in place won't accommodate that growth. So we have to be able to assess both. And that was Ansoff's idea. He brought back into a total management approach to looking at strategy. Third area that we look at is the positioning school. This is Michael Porter. Michael Porter comes up with the generic strategies. He looks at 4 generic strategies, a very simple approach. In fact, managers during the 1980s loved Porter's books because it was so simple. Porter simply said your company is either going to sell a product based on its low price. You're going to sell that product or service based on its uniqueness, its differentiation, so you can get a higher price for that product or service. And of those 2, you're going to sell to a focused market or you're going to sell to a broad market. There's the 4 strategies. And the managers loved it because of the fact that they could do a process of elimination. Well, I'm not low cost, so I must be differentiation. And I'm selling to a lot of people, so I must be broad and I'm not focused. So my strategy is differentiation broad. So it really was an easy sell for a lot of managers. Now, a lot of stuff he does, in fact, we're going to be using Porter and we're going to be using his generic strategies here. He looks also at strategic groups. Very important. Who actually is our competitor in this industry? We know in industries there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of competitors, but who really is your competition? So strategic groups identify who really your competition is. He also has value chain analysis, looking at the linked set of value creating activities going from raw material to that finished good. What are those activities and where along that string of activities can we gain some advantage? Game theories he came up with, all of this was analytical. So it fits very, very well into a strong strategic management approach. The last one that we look at, one more that we look at here is the learning school. Odd type of strategy. This is not formalized. This is not analytical. It is adaptive. It is, as that firm moves forward, our strategy is going to adapt to those changing conditions. Firms that are established can't use this because it's very, very expensive, very, very extremely disruptive to an organization, bouncing from one strategy to another one. So it does not work for firms that have been established and moving forward. This does, however, work for a startup. Startup really doesn't know who the competition is, doesn't really know or identified who their buyers are yet. They're still going through a growing spurt themselves. They're trying to identify who they are as a company. And as they do that, and as they refine their products or refine their services, they can refine their customers and they can make their strategy change to adapt to those changing conditions. The last one here is the resource-based theory. Internally, we're looking, this one here is all internal. We're looking at the firm's resources, capabilities, competencies, identifying them, and when we exploit them, trying to gain a competitive advantage. So it's not only just identifying them, you have to be able to exploit those identified resources and capabilities and competencies. What we're looking for then is these internal areas that we've identified and those external opportunities out there. And is there an area there where it's just a great fit? That opportunity fits right perfectly with what it is that we do really, really well. And if that happens, that's called a strategic fit. All right, now with strategy, it explicitly positions that firm through both two things. Looks at the competitive advantage of that firm, long-term goals and objectives to maintain that competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage can be done either through cost, providing a product or service at a low cost, or providing a product or service that is uniquely different and perceived to be uniquely different by that buyer. That's a differentiation strategy. Now, with both of those, we have to look internally at the operational effectiveness of that firm and through what the firm's capacities are, their capabilities, and their commitments are. And we have to identify what the firm does really, really well with their capabilities. Are they very, very good at keeping their costs down? That would be following a low-cost strategy. Are they very, very good at marketing and innovation and R&D? Well, maybe now what we're looking at is a strategy that's a differentiation strategy. So strategy then helps to position that firm. Strategy, as it developed, it came from somewhere. And several years ago, probably, well, let's see, strategy came around in 70, strategic management came around in 70. So this would be back in the 40s, 30s, 40s. Long-range planning was the method that was used by firms to move their firm forward. Long-range planning. In fact, you still hear that. You still hear firms say, yeah, we're in the process of doing long-range planning. What's probably a misnomer right now when they use the term long-range planning, because they're really taking into account other things. Back then, when it was originally done, long-range planning was nothing more than an extrapolation of what the firm has previously done and trying to take that extrapolation and moving it forward. So we're assuming that all of the conditions that existed in the performance of the firm at that time will then continue going forward. Well, the problem there is we know that doesn't happen. We know that industry conditions change, buyers' needs change, other factors enter into it. So what was is no guarantee of what will be going forward. And so they quickly realized that long-range planning in and of itself isn't really giving us what we really need to do in order to move our firm forward. We've got to look at some of the external factors that are having an effect on our industry. And so enters in then strategic planning. Strategic planning now was used for those firms that were agile enough to see that the external environment is changing and that they could change along with that external environment. Chris, you have a question.
Yeah, so for planning on our simulation, will there be any traps where a product is a fad and all of a sudden it has all this demand, and if we don't forecast correctly, then we're left with a bunch of product within the simulation?
No, there won't be any traps at all.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, no, it's not going to do that. Now there is settings in the game where I can throw in all sorts of nasty stuff on you guys. We're not doing that. The game in and of itself right now has enough complexity that I don't want to have you guys get frustrated with, we were going along so great and all of a sudden this came up and, boom, now we're not doing so well. Yes, to answer your question, no traps.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So strategic planning comes in now. This is our next stage going forward, our next progression, evolution in our movement towards strategic management. Again, what I was saying is this is making the assumption that those firms are becoming more agile to account for what's changing in that environment. And now they can start to position that firm, making good decisions so that they can help to respond to or prepare for what those changing conditions are, whether they're technological or legal or political or whatever they might be going forward. Now we move into strategic management. This is the one that was developed by H. Igor Ansoff. He is the father of strategic management. He's the one that said that, yeah, strategic planning is great, but it's not the management of the organization. This is really kind of looking at that external environment and making sure that you can move along with that. But this has nothing to do with those other areas that are necessary for a good strategic management approach to that firm. And so strategic management is then this, it's the analysis. So you're making an analysis of that firm internally and externally. You're analyzing a lot of different areas. It's from those analysis that you're doing, you're then making informed decisions. And from those informed decisions, then that firm can then take actions, strategic actions, implement a new strategy. And then from those implemented strategies, you can evaluate how well each one is doing. So there's the 4 steps of that: analysis, decisions, actions, and evaluations. And if we break it down, it would look like this. The analysis then is that evaluating the firm's goals and mission and vision, their strategic objective, and then looking at that competitive position using the strategic analysis tools that we're going to be using in this course. Decisions then would be the formulation, the planning, and developing the strategies. Actions would be implementing those strategies, and of course, evaluating would be looking at modifying them or adjusting them or analyzing those, the effectiveness of those strategies. Now, with strategic management, we still keep that strategic planning. That's a great idea. We need to know what's going on in that external environment. But now we look at the capabilities planning. What are we capable of doing? If we're planning this strategy, do we have the capabilities to complete that strategy? So we have to analyze internally whether or not we have the capabilities to do it. And then change management. We talked about change management. That's the behavioral and systemic resistance that needs to be analyzed before that strategy becomes effective. So strategic formulation, 2 parts of that. When we're formulating a strategy, we have to consider what the firm is doing right now, that near-term profit making. We still have to make money. Even though we're planning our strategy for the future, we cannot lose emphasis on what we're doing right now. That's the thing that is generating the money that is going to support our strategy for our development of future profit potential. So we have to look at it from operational and strategic. Operational is a near-term profit making. Strategic is the development of that future profit potential of that firm. So strategic formulation has to look at both sides of that. There's 4 characteristics of strategic management. First of all, it's interdisciplinary. It doesn't focus on one functional area of that firm. It looks at all the functional areas and how they work together to support that strategy. Strategic management is externally focused. In fact, it's constantly looking at the external environment because we know the external environment is always changing. Now, it can be changing for the good, it can be changing for the bad, but we have to make sure that we're analyzing what's going on and monitoring what's going on and determining whether or not these signs that we're seeing, are they getting stronger or weaker? And what do we do then if they're getting stronger or weaker? How do we adapt to these changing conditions? Internally focused. Again, we're looking at the resources and we're looking at the capabilities and competencies. And then we have to take a look at the view of that organization in the future. What's this company going to look like in 5 years? If we do nothing, are we going to be here in 5 years? If we don't make any strategic changes at all, are we going to be here in 5 years? What's technology doing right now that might have an effect on our firm in 5 years? Well, that's probably a good question we could throw out there for all of us. What's technology going to look like in 5 years? What's the automotive industry going to look like in 5 years from now? What's
More
aviation?
electric?
Yeah, more electric, right. Now, with that, good answer, with that, more electric vehicles, what else comes along with that? You're gonna need
I mean,
charging,
you got all the, yeah, I'm sorry, charging stations, like,
right?
you know, a lot, power grids upgraded, a whole lot of stuff's gotta come into play for that to be effective.
Right. So with that, then you can see that if we're going to have more electric vehicles, we're going to have more charging stations, and those people that are building charging stations, that's an opportunity, right? What about the mom and pop gas station? Are they going to be able to add all these charging stations? Because their revenue right now is based on quick turns. How long does it take you to go in and fill your car up with gas? 10 minutes? Right?
I mean, I would think the government's gonna have to get involved in that stuff a lot with like grants and, you know what I mean,
Possibly.
incentives, like something.
Right. But still, okay, so right now the mom and pop, their gas station, they're having a turn of maybe, 5 to 10 minutes per customer coming in getting gas. How long does it take to charge a vehicle? Even if it's super quick charge, what is it, 40 minutes?
I think, yeah, like I have a hybrid Jeep Wrangler and it's off of 110, it's like 14 hours. If I have a 240, it's like 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Takes a while, doesn't it? to get a
Yeah,
full
yeah,
charge?
it's not quick, like
Not,
definitely.
not quick. So if you're a mom and pop gas station, those 15-minute turnarounds for gasoline, that's not happening. Right? So their churn, or I should say their revenue stream of however they're going to charge for the charging station is certainly going to be different than how they charge for gasoline. And even though it's going to be incentivized by the government, possibly, it's going to have most likely a negative effect on those mom and pop gas stations.
That's why most of these charging stations are getting put next to like major malls. So they could park their vehicles there and then go shopping.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's how
Right,
it is,
and-
like where I
and-
live.
And now that's actually a benefit to the mall, isn't it? They're actually able now with that, knowing that consumer knows that, okay, I've got, I need at least an hour to charge my car. So instead of just standing by my car while it's charging, I'm going to walk around the mall in here and do some shopping. And we know that the longer a consumer spends shopping, the higher the probability is that they're going to buy something.
Or even like the mom and pop places, you know, they're gonna have to put in little like entertainment rooms basically where, you know, people can go sit down and hang out, watch a movie, watch TV while their car charges.
Yeah, and that's expensive too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's going to make some changes. So that's the view of the future. What's going to happen going forward? Okay.
I thought about something else too. When you
Sure,
look
Rose.
About it, all these charging stations are gonna be putting in, right? Perfect example, my husband works for a local city and they have a few charging stations, so guess what? They're all constantly being broken because they're stealing the wiring from them. How do we know that you're gonna be able to rely on these charging stations, even if they're the malls, wherever they're at? I mean, you can get screwed on that, so you gotta think about that too, a security type of something, so that those charging stations can
Oh, everyone
supply
wants the
whatever
copper.
it is. Mhm.
So they're stealing the copper
Exactly.
wire. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you gotta think about that too. It's like, I mean, I own 9 cars and they're all combustible. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I have to get an electric car, and I have all the toys, I do all that fun stuff. How in the heck am I gonna get from where I'm going now to, let's just say, the river in Arizona? There's no way. I mean, you have to have charging stations all throughout the way. So they have to really think about it. And I don't think they really thought about this plan. Of how they're going to do this electric grid, how they're gonna put all this electric stuff. So I don't know, you gotta look at it from the strategic management, just like we're talking about right now. It all goes into play because time is money, money is time, and strategy. You have to think about it in every aspect, every single aspect in order to be successful.
Yep. Good point, Rosa. Robert, you have a question?
Well, I just want to make a comment. I know there's technology starting to catch up, and they're creating more powerful batteries that last longer. I'm sure, in the near future, they're going to have batteries that can take your car a lot further than they go now, since it's kind of the infancy stage of electric cars. And once they can make it, I guess, affordable, those longer range, more powerful batteries will power the cars, take it much further than they do now, to where you can go to Arizona and back on a one battery round trip.
Yeah, most assuredly. We know for certain that technology does continually make advances. And so, yeah, the batteries are going to be longer lasting. They're going to be more powerful. Hopefully it's going to be less expensive. You're right. Technology always moves forward, but still, even as technology moves forward, you're going to have other types of issues that are going to, pop up as well. And especially when we're looking at a national grid, we've got long areas within the United States that there's not even gas stations between these long areas. If you go along West Texas, you got, a few 100, 300, 400 miles where there's nothing out there. So
I think the other stuff that people aren't realizing too is the electric waste that these vehicles are going to have.
yeah,
Once they go down, we can't just send them to an island and just leave it there. I mean, we're going to have to figure out something. What are we going to do
Yeah,
with
what do you
these
do with the
batteries?
battery?
How
Yeah.
do we recycle them?
Yeah, how do you do that? Right. Yeah. All right, let's move forward. The strategic management, there's 5 stages here that we're looking at. First of all, we want to develop a strategic vision and we want to craft a good mission statement. That's step 1. Next one, we want to set the strategic goals and objectives. Along with strategic goals and objectives, we want to conduct what's meaningful, or what would be a meaningful environmental scanning, looking at all of the external environmental conditions. And we're going to be covering that in that chapter 3, which we're going to come up with here soon. Then we formulate the strategy, we implement that strategy, and then we monitor, evaluate, and control. Those are the 5 steps of that. Now, what would be some of those drivers of change? Well, internally, we could be looking at our capabilities. Our capabilities have increased, so we can try to maybe do a growth strategy. Resources and resource allocations, maybe new inventions. Other drivers of change internally would be just dissatisfaction with the performance that we have, and we want to improve our performance, and a desire to be maybe a different position in the marketplace. Externally, of course, the customers have a lot to say with whether or not they think our product or service is the one that they want. So a customer has a lot of input into a driver of change. They can implement change with a firm by just simply not buying from you anymore, and your sales go down, your profits go down, and you have to address that. You address it by making those changes. Competitors and new competitors, investors entering into the marketplace or entering into your business, technology, how technology changes, and of course, we know governmental changes. And of course, we're going to be looking at many more of these, as I mentioned, going forward. Well, here is the strategic management process. You've got that establishing of the vision and mission statement, and then we do the goal setting. We look at the corporate objectives, and we do an environmental scan. Under the formulation, we do an internal analysis, the external analysis. We complete all of the performance matrices, and there's about 14 of them that you guys are going to be going through. Strategic implementation, we do the change management, looking at behavioral and systemic, and making sure that the corporate culture is going to be supportive. And then evaluate and monitor. We look at corporate governance, making sure that we are going to be a good corporate citizen in the environment that we're competing, and looking at social responsibility as well. So right now, what we're at, we are going to start with this next area here, looking at the SWOT analysis. That's really a matching stage, because when we do a SWOT analysis, we're actually doing what's called SWOT matching. Now, the information from the SWOT really comes into the input stage. It's one of the first things we do. But since it is a matching, they throw it into stage 2 as a matching item. In the first stage, the input stage, we're gathering data from the external environment. we're looking at the internal environment on IFE. And then we do something called the competitive profile matrix. And that's really an interesting one. In fact, whenever I do an analysis of the firm, that's one of the best matrices that is performed with the input of those decision makers of that firm. They're the ones that are actually giving me the data that goes into that matrix. They're the ones that are actually coming up with the results on that. So it's a lot of that is fed by those decision makers. Under the matching stage, of course, we talked about the SWOT. Some of the other areas that we're going to be looking at, this is another matrix that you're going to complete. It's called the SPACE, the Strategic Position Action Evaluation. We look at two of the matrices that are positional matrices. One's the Boston Consulting Group, and the other one's a GE McKinsey. And then we do an IE matrix, and then we do a Grand Strategies matrix. Those are under the matching stage. Under the final decision stage, there's a matrix. It's a stage 3. It's called a Quantitative Strategic Planning Matrix. So that's kind of a preview of all the stuff that you guys get to do here coming forward. All right. Quickly, I'm going to look at management vision and mission statement, and then I'm going to give you guys a break, and then we'll jump into the external environment because we're going along pretty good. I got a chat came in here. Let's see here. Okay, Angela's switching over to a cell phone. Cool. All right. Okay. So how is this working out for you guys? Is this method of teaching and discourse, is it aligning with your expectations of the course, or do we need to make any adjustments here? Or are you guys going, is it going good for you guys?
I mean, I'm learning stuff.
That's a good thing, Zach. Robert's got his thumb up too. Good, good. Rosa, how you doing? You think it's going to make it?
I hope so.
All
I
right.
really do.
No, good, good. Hey, Chris, what's up? You got a question?
Yeah, I just wish there was more examples of like snippets of the simulation where if we make decisions, how it affects us overall. So that way we can understand that and be able to make a better decision instead of guessing what that kind of what's going to look like. Because I understand it visually, but on the simulation to input those numbers with the software,
Yep.
I'm still kind of.
All right. You want me to give you guys like a little cheat code?
Of course.
If you were to go to YouTube and if you were to enter in CapSim or how to best play CapSim, there are probably dozens of YouTubes from former players that have done very, very, very well in CapSim, and they will give you the inside scoop on how to best play CapSim. I mean, just follow the YouTube video, and they are some of the, well, because it's been done by students and they've performed well, and they really took an interest in the game, they developed these YouTubes, and they're really, really informative. They're really good. So just kind of search YouTube and look under CapSim, best way to play CapSim or something like that. And I think what you'll find is going to be rewarding to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, management vision. So management vision affects the choice of the strategy. It does. So where that firm wants to go has a lot to do with what kind of strategy we need to reach that vision. The firm's strategy then chooses the environment in which it needs in order to achieve that vision. And the environment then determines whether or not the objectives that are set and the goals that are set are going to be attainable. Well, that makes sense. So if your goal is to achieve 10% growth, but the environment that you're in is only growing at 2 to 3%, that might not work. So the environment then does determine whether or not those goals and objectives are attainable. And the goals affect the strategy and are subject to the resource constraints, which also makes sense. You can only achieve your goals through an effective strategy if you have the resources to do that. You got to make sure that you have all the resources that are needed in order for your strategy to be supported. So management vision is also called the strategic vision or the management creed. So it is going to be a statement that is a future statement. This is something that we're trying to do. We're moving forward. So it's going to be an inspiring statement of the future. This is the direction that we want to go with our firm. This is what we are hoping to be, hoping to aspire to be, what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So it's really like the future course of that firm. It's the purpose of that firm. And it should be, you know, some sort of a brief statement on how that firm is going to achieve that stated purpose there. Mission statement is a little bit different. That's the here and now. It explains to not only those customers, those vendors, or those employees, and those employees, what it is that we're doing. And in fact, when you guys did your missions, or when you did your Robinhood case study, a good mission statement for Robinhood that explains the here and now of Robinhood to those new band members, or to those nobles out there that they were robbing, or to those people that they were supporting. A good mission statement would be rob from the rich and give to the poor. Here and now, it explains what it is that we do. It is our present business purpose. So a mission statement doesn't have to be a long thing, but what it does have to do is kind of tell you what it is that we're doing now. The French term for the here and now is the raison d'être, the reason for being. So a mission statement needs to define what the company is, not what it's not. It should have some distinguishing elements in it from what it's doing that others don't do. It should have a framework to evaluate its current activities. We're going to be number one in customer service. We're going to provide high quality. We're going to be robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, whatever that framework is. It should be clear to everyone to understand. Limited statement, doesn't have to be a long statement, but yet, you know, allow for some sort of growth in that. Well, here they are relative to each other. You got the strategic vision, that's where we're going, and the mission statement is the current, who we are and what we're doing. You guys can take a look at that. Where are we here? We almost done with this. Boy, this is a long chapter here. All right, values. Values are important. Values are actually part of the operating philosophy, the principles of that organization. They're those things that have been around a long, long time. Those are those things that the firm, the culture of the firm, believe in. Those are those mores of that, those employees that develop that culture of what it is that we believe in and how we go about doing things and how we treat our customers and how we feel about quality and how we feel about customer service. Those core values of that firm are actually oftentimes found in that mission statement of that firm. Like I said, quality, customer service, dependability, pricing, and often move forward with that firm. That core values of that firm can become competitive advantages for that firm. Think about customer service and quality. If those are really strong core values of that firm and they're exploited, they can be a competitive advantage for that firm. So the organization, well, I'm going to move forward here. We're going to be talking about, just do goals and objectives and then we'll go forward. All right. There is a difference between goals and objectives. Goals are broad. Let's talk about this. Goals are going to be broad. They're general outcome and concept. This is what the organization intends to accomplish. They don't have specifics. They don't have measurables. They don't have a timeline on them. They're a goal of what we intend to do in a broad sense. The objectives are what achieves those goals. They're going to be precise. They're going to be measurable. They're going to have a stated future time in which that particular objective is going to be expected to be due. So there's a difference between goals and objectives. So a well-stated objective is going to be precise and measurable. It's going to be specific. It's going to be realistic and achievable. You don't want to have a goal that can't be achieved. It's going to specify a time period. And it's going to be appropriate with the organization's vision and mission. In other words, if the mission of the organization is, remember the current, the here and now, we are going to provide quality customer service, quality products for our customers. That's their mission statement. But if your objective is to cut costs in all areas of operation, including operations, well, that means that you're cutting the costs on your products and your customer service. And those two don't align together. So in other words, your goals and your objectives have to have an alignment to them. I should say your mission statement and your objectives have to be in alignment. Here they are next to each other. Goals are going to be broad. Objectives are narrow. Goals are general intention. Objectives are going to be precise. Goals are intangible. Objectives are tangible. Goals are abstract. Objectives are concrete. And goals can't be validated, but objectives can be validated. I've got some chats coming in here. Let's see here. Okay, perfect for me. Angela, me too. Okay, I guess that's good. Yeah, I love the tip. All right, good. All right, we are done with this particular chapter, chapter 1. I'm going to give you guys a break. What do you say we come back at, I don't know, 7:30? Is that too late? Is that too long? Give you guys a chance to go grab something to eat and come back. And then we're going to be talking about external environment of that firm, which is going to be a fun one to talk about. We may not be able to get through all of it, but we'll give it a good shot. Okay, guys. So let's take a break right now. And I'll external environment of the firm. And we're not going to be able to finish the chapter. This particular chapter has some matrices in it, which is going to take some time to do. So next week, we'll get back into this and we'll start with the matrices. We will do the SWOT matching tonight. In addition to that, there's one called the confrontation, impact probability, positioning matrix, competitive profile matrix, and then the external factors evaluation. So there's a few matrices that go along with this particular chapter here, and they'll require a little bit of time to go through those. So we'll spend some time on that next week. All right, let me get to the chapter here. There we go. Can you guys see it? All right, excellent. So the objectives then for this particular chapter is to be looking at that external environment and what are those most important aspects that are in that macro environment that can have an effect on our industry. And then of course, if it's going to affect our industry, it's going to affect our firm. And then understanding why it's important to not only scan for these events, but continue to monitor them to see whether or not they are increasing in a sense of urgency for either an opportunity or presenting us with a threat. And the advantage of collecting this intelligence from not only externally, which would then include our competition as well, but there are some difficulties when you're trying to collect information on your competition. They're not also willing to give you that information that you're seeking from them. So how do we go about doing that, or what's the best way? We'll talk a little bit about ANSOF's environmental turbulence level, but that'll be covered next week. And then understanding the benefits and limitations of the SWOT, the confrontation, the impact probability analysis. A couple other things we're going to be looking at here. How those competitive forces in the environment can affect your profitability. Well, that's going to be pretty self-stated once we see what these particular factors are and how it can have an effect on our firm. We will be looking at strategic group mapping in this chapter too. So that's another area of assessment that was developed by Porter. And then finally, we're going to be doing the external factors analysis and how to interpret its outcome. So environmental scanning, quite simply what that is an internal communication to those decision makers about that external information on those issues that might have a influence on the organization's decision-making process of what type of strategy we should be pursuing. So it's looking out externally, conveying that information to those decision makers on what these particular factors are. So here are the areas that environmental scanning then covers. And one way of thinking of this is called the PESTEL analysis. So it's kind of a analysis framework for analyzing and screening that external environment, looks at these 6 macro environmental factors. And within these macro environmental factors, there's several topics that need to be considered in each one of these. So let's start off then with political. PESTEL, political. These would be those forces that are created by the government or unilateral bodies. They're the ones that declare certain rules and regulations and laws and restrictions. Recently, California voted to ban new car gas sales by 2035. New York, Oregon, Washington, Rhode Island, and several other states are going to do this as well. Question to you. If we're going to get rid of new car gas sales in 2035, that means the only cars that are going to be able to be sold, new cars in California in 2035 will be electric. All right. That was a political move done by the governor of the state of California. How is that then going to have an effect on certain industries? We know it will. It's going to provide for some industries opportunities, and for some industries, it's going to provide a threat to them. So remember, one of the things about strategic management was looking forward. We're in 2022 right now. We're only looking at, 13 years ahead. So some of these firms that will benefit from this are going to have to position themselves so they can take full benefit of this. And others that are going to have a negative effect of this, they're going to have to try to find a way to maybe change their business model so that this particular new law isn't going to have such an adverse effect on them. Here's other areas of political that need to be considered. What's the stability of the government and the likelihood of changes? Now, this isn't just the US. If you're a firm that is competing internationally, you got to consider what's the government in that country is doing. And is that government in that country likely to change? What level of bureaucracy exists? What are the tax policies? What are those rates and incentives? Well, California is known for having high taxes. Does that have an effect on a firm? Are there other states that provide lower tax rates and bases that companies might want to consider moving to keep their expenditures down? What about level of corruption? How about freedom of press, regulation and deregulation? Any control on trade that might exist? Import restrictions, either on quality or quantity. Tariffs. Well, we know tariffs. We've seen tariffs in the last administration. We have tariffs right now in this administration. Now, tariffs are supposed to equal the playing field, but most often when a tariff is placed on a country, there's going to be reciprocity. They're going to place a tariff back on us in some form or fashion. And will that tariff that they're placing on us have an effect on your industry? And then looking at competition regulation and the involvement the government has in trade unions and agreements, and in environmental law and education law, consumer protection and e-commerce, and any laws regulating environmental pollution. We don't have a great say-so when the EPA comes out to our manufacturing plant and says that you have 90 days to put scrubbers on your smokestacks. And if you don't do it within 90 days, we're shutting you down. You either comply, spend the money to do it, or you shut down. So that's the first one. That's political. Here's the second one. Economic. Now we're looking at national, regional, global economic performance and the trends that have an effect on the attractiveness of a business or where the firm might want to do business. Looking specifically at growth rate, inflation rate. Well, what's our inflation rate right now, guys? It was up at 10.7. What is it now? Still high, mid-8. In fact, it's 8.7. How about interest rates? Have they changed because of inflation? And the worry about recession. Has our interest rates changed? What about mortgages right now? What's the mortgage rate? 7%? Significantly higher than what it was a year ago. How about exchange rate, unemployment trends, labor costs? Well, we know since COVID that there's been a labor shortage. And we know then that those people that are going back to work are seeking higher wages. And companies now are forced to pay higher wages. So labor costs have gone up. Another thing we look at is the stage of the business cycle. This has to do with the life cycle. The life cycle we'll be talking about a little bit later in some of the other chapters, but basically what it is that emergent stage when the product or that business or that industry is introduced. And then you have the growth 1 stage where it's accelerated growth. Growth 2 still is growing, but starting to show signs of slowdown, starting to show signs of saturation. Then we have maturity where that market is saturated and we have decline. So economically, where are we in that business cycle? Another thing to consider is credit and the availability of credit, trade flows and patterns. And how much disposable income does that consumer have? Monetary policies, fiscal policies. What about price fluctuation? What's going on in the stock market? Well, so far these last 4 days, the stock market's gone down a bit. Last week it went up. But overall, in the last year, since January 4th, we've gone down 4,000 points. The weather and climate change. Now, anyone that says that we're not going through climate change, I would have to have a discussion with them because there's signs of climate change, not only in the US, but all over the world. When's the last time you heard the Mississippi drying up? Well, it is. Mississippi's drying up. Lake Mead is drying up. Colorado River is drying up. And then we have flooding back east. And you have severe flooding in other areas of the world. All right. That's number 2. That's economic. Let's go to social. This is the lifestyle changes. These are the things that we as a culture start to change. We start to adapt to and accept and move forward. Things like health consciousness, level of education, our attitudes towards imported goods and services, the attitudes that we might have towards work and the amount of leisure time that we want and retirement. Have you heard of the term quietly quitting? Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of articles about that
Right.
recently.
Yeah. That's when your boss says, hey, can you work extra overtime tonight? You know, just kind of for the good of the company. And in the past, we'd say, okay, well, yeah, I've got something to do, but I'll do it. Now the attitude is, no, I'm not doing it. 5 o'clock, I'm out of here. You find someone else to do that. I've done my job. I'm fulfilling my obligation to this company. And I'm not going to do that. Quietly quitting. That's a new attitude towards work. Yeah, Christopher, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of in the process of doing that.
There you go. How
Um,
do you want to explain?
Yeah, no, I used to travel a lot for work, and every time there was an opportunity to go, I was always the first one to, raise a hand and travel. And unfortunately, because of COVID and change of management, people, passing away, there's new management, upper management, and everything's restructured. And I kind of got bypassed in a couple of promotions. So now I'm just doing the bare minimum and not traveling as much as I normally would. And I'm still
Yeah.
getting paid the same. So
Yeah, and so you're doing your job, you're just not putting in more than what you need to put in.
yeah. So
Yeah, good. All right, what about attitudes towards savings and investing? And emphasis on safety and lifestyle, buying habits, religion and beliefs, attitude towards green products or ecological products, their attitude and support for renewable energy. Well, we talked about that with electric vehicles. Population growth rate. Is the population in the United States growing? Anybody thought about that one? Are we actually maintaining the same population, or are we growing? And if so, by what amount? I think it would surprise you if you look and see what the actual population growth rate is for the United States. It's probably smaller than what you think. How about immigration and emigration rates? Age distribution and life expectancy rates. The life expectancy for the United States went down because of COVID, and it went down by several years. So if you take a look at the life expectancy rate for the US male, you're going to see that has gone down since COVID was around in 2020.
And fentanyl.
And fentanyl, exactly, Robert. That has been a big influence as well. Average disposable income level, social classes, family size and structure, and minorities. So if you look at that list, you can pick out any one of those particular items in there, and you could see how one of those items might have an effect on an industry or a company within an industry. And so when we're looking at these macro environmental factors, we have to really kind of consider all of these, and will it either now or later have an effect on our industry performance, our company's performance. Let's go to technology. These are forces that can significantly alter the demand of a product or service. In fact, technology has been often called the industry killer. When industries are using old methodology and new technology comes in and replaces that old technology or that product, it could kill that particular industry. Other areas of technology that we look at is the infrastructure level. How will that change? What about rate of technological change? How quickly is it occurring within our industry? How much spending is going on in R&D in our industry as it relates to technology? Are there any incentives being provided by the government to businesses related to technology? What's the legislation regarding technology and the level of technology that exists within our industry? And then we look at the communication infrastructure and whether or not industries or those firms in industries have access to the newest technology. And we look at infrastructure of the internet and penetration, and then disruption in technological development. Well, we've seen disruption in technological development with the manufacture of computer chips and how the lack or the low manufacturing rate of computer chips, or lack of, has had a disruptive effect on the automotive industry. Ford and GM were unable to complete some of their cars because they didn't have the required computer chips for those cars. All right, that's technology. Environment. These are those factors that are in part have been determined by the actions that we as humans have caused to the environment. We have climate change. We have infrastructure, the development of oil and gas, and the pollution that comes from the oil and gas. How about deforestation, overfishing, wildfires, flooding, pollution, water scarcity, can't argue with that one, and soil erosion. Now think about those factors right there. Are there going to be businesses that will be affected by those particular factors? Water scarcity. How about the farmers up in Central Valley having to cut back on the amount of water that they have to water their crops? What about overfishing? On the East Coast, the Maine lobster, that's the lobster that everyone wants to have is a Maine lobster, has been put on a red list because of another species has been depleted. And because of its depletion is causing the Maine lobster, they're putting a freeze on harvesting Maine lobsters. Robert, you have a question?
Oh, I just want to make a comment to, in Alaska, Kodiak Island, where all the deadliest catch boats are,
Right.
where they canceled the season for the snow crab or whatever up there too.
I heard that. And I there were like millions of snow crabs that just suddenly disappeared, wasn't it? And they really don't have an explanation of where they went or why they disappeared. They just disappeared.
And they
And
said it could be years before they are healthy enough for the industry to pick back up.
right. Now, I didn't read, I probably read the same article as you, but I didn't read what they think is the cause of that. They just found out,
The temperatures are.
oh, the
were-
temperature.
were- Yeah, the water.
Okay. So the water temperature is causing them to leave or to die
Or to go further north into
north, right?
waters
Okay.
that aren't as fishable, I guess.
All right. Good point. Very good point. So you can see there's an industry right there that has been affected by that. Right? And it might be affected for several years, as you mentioned, right, Robert? All right, good. Here's the last one. It's legal. And of course, these would be those laws, those external factors that have an effect on how the business operates and how those customers then would behave. We got antitrust law, we got discrimination law, copyright, patents, intellectual property, employment law, health and safety, data protection law. All right, so you can see then with all of these pestle factors, we got 6 of them there. There are multiple within each of those categories, factors that can have an effect on firm performance. Robert just pointed out a very good one with the snow crabs right there. And that could be a long-lasting type of environmental factor affecting that multi-million-dollar business. Now, with these factors, 1 is bad, 2 is bad. But when you have several of them, and they're really kind of overlapping each other, that's called an imbrication or imbrication of factors. It's the overlapping effect. And when we have this imbrication of these causal strands, the environmental conditions or that environmental magnitude and the effects of that on that firm are significantly heightened. It's not like a 1 + 1 additive type of thing. It's a multiplying effect to it. So it's an overlapping of them. You just can't get rid of one and it gets rid of another one. They're kind of like intertwined to each other. Sun Tzu says something about competitive forces. So we're going to kind of move from the pestle over to analyzing our competition now. The more you know about your enemy, the better you know yourself, and the outcome of the battle has already been decided. simply what Sun Tzu is saying is the more information you know about your competition, the more you know about them, your strategy is going to be much, much better. Let me ask you a question, Zach. If you knew, let's say you're a coach of a football team and I'm a coach of a football team, and you knew what strategy I'm going to be using during my game, would that affect your decision on what kind of strategies you're going to be using?
Oh, absolutely, because I'm gonna know how
Yeah.
to counter everything you're doing.
Right. So you know what I'm doing, right?
Mhm.
Okay, that's right. You're right. So the more you know about what I'm doing, the better your strategy is going to be. The more you know about my strengths, the more you know about where I'm weak, you're going to capitalize on my weakness and you're going to try and defend against my strengths. You're going to try and mitigate my strengths, right? That's just makes sense. The same with a company. We want to do that with a company, but here's the problem. How do you get information on the company? How do you find out from them where they're weak? You can't go up there and knock on the door and say, hey, by the way, I'm Zach and I want to find out from you, Rosa, what are those things about your company where you think you're weak? Can you kind of tell me where you're weak so that we can, maybe take advantage of you? She's not going to tell you that at all. So how do you go about getting that information? It's really, really a challenge to get that kind of information. The few ways that you can do that would be if you could go ahead and get information from maybe if they're a public company, their annual report, or maybe from their vendors, or maybe from their customers, or maybe from their former employees to get information on them. And if we can find out enough information where we can actually formulate a SWOT, we can list their strengths, we can list their weaknesses, we can list their opportunities and their threats. That way we can minimize any kind of surprises that we might encounter from them, and we can best position ourselves against them. All right, let's go to monitoring. So we've done the scanning. We've looked at all those pestle environmental factors. We can't stop there. We got to continue to monitor. We want to monitor to see whether or not these factors are increasing in intensity or whether or not these factors are diminishing, going away. Maybe it's a law that is now being changed. Maybe it is some other area that we've found and now it is not as important as it was, but still monitoring it is going to be important. And again, this monitoring of information, monitoring the severity of it or intensity of it, and passing that on then to the decision makers is going to be part of how we plan our strategy. All right. So here's where we are. Here's where those inputs come in. We do the environmental scanning, we do the monitoring as well, and we take as much competitive intelligence as we can, and those help us create the forecasts for our strategy and our unit going forward. And as it lays out in the full strategic management process, we have that external environment that we look at, our internal environment that we will be doing a little bit later. Those two come together to form our SWOT analysis, making sure that it aligns with our mission statement. From our SWOT analysis, we can start doing some analysis of the firm and its environment and come up with a strategic plan. We can then implement that strategy and we can look at the strategic outcomes. All right, here's what we're going to talk about tonight. And this will be the last area that we're going to cover. And that's going to be the SWOT analysis. Now, how many of you guys, if you can kind of raise your hand, how many of you guys have done a SWOT analysis before? Yeah, Robert has. Okay, right. See if there's others that have done it. All right. Kenneth has done it. There we go. Anybody else done a SWOT analysis? Angela says she did. Okay, good. All right. Now, I'm not sure how you did your SWOT analysis before. Perhaps it's the same as this, but maybe not. What we're going to be doing with this SWOT analysis is called SWOT matching. That's why it was found in that second section of matching areas when we looked at the formulation stages. it is an important tool for the firm to understand its strategic position. Internally, we look at the firm's strengths and the weaknesses. Now, the strengths, these are factors that we can control. These are within our control. These are mainly the functional areas, the resources and capabilities, and the management of that firm. We have control over maintaining these strengths or whether or not these strengths diminish. Externally, or excuse me, weaknesses are one of those things that are challenging for us as well. If we're weak in a particular area, yes, we can control that because it is internal. These are those areas that we would have to really pay attention to make sure that we can change that weakness to at least some sort of competitive parity. Externally, we look at opportunities and threats. Opportunities are those areas of growth or expansion that environment presents to that firm when they're able to exploit their resources and capabilities. Externally, opportunities and threats are largely beyond the control of that firm. We don't have any control over creating new opportunities or creating threats or diminishing threats. Those things are largely beyond the control. So an external opportunity provides that organization with a means to improve its performance and also its competitive advantage in that market, as well as mitigating a weakness. So let me explain that. So when we're looking at an opportunity out there and we've identified that we're weak in an area and we're thinking, okay, how in the heck can we be weak? And there's an opportunity out there and that opportunity is going to make us, or it's going to reduce our weakness. Well, let me give you an example. Let's say Jaime has a manufacturing plant. And Jaime did a SWOT analysis and he realized part of the weaknesses is that his manufacturing plant has high labor costs, high fixed costs. And so he's weak compared to his competition based on his cost structure. But then also in his SWOT analysis, under his opportunities, he has listed a new area for manufacturing potential that has low labor costs and low fixed costs as well. So if he were to pursue that opportunity and get that other area, that other manufacturing site, that opportunity then would mitigate his weakness of high manufacturing costs. So that's how that opportunity then can mitigate an internal weakness. So when we're looking then at matching these things, we're trying to find ways that we can use opportunities to mitigate our weaknesses as well. External threats, anything external outside that environment that can have an adverse effect on the firm's achievement of its goals. So when you're thinking of a SWOT, you can kind of ask yourself some questions. What is it that makes you strong? Strong, and what is it that makes you weak? What kind of opportunities are in the marketplace that when we use our resources and capabilities, we can capitalize on? And what are the threats out there that can undermine our organization with its goals and its mission statement? And we look like this thing here. We have our environmental scanning, and that environmental scanning provides us with some information having to do with the external analysis and the internal analysis. And from the internal analysis, we determine our strengths and weaknesses. And externally, we look at our opportunities and threats. And those are the 4 categories that create our SWOT. So here's how we do this. We're going to list our key internal strengths. And then we're going to list our key internal weaknesses. Additionally, we're going to list the key external opportunities as well as the key external threats. Now we're going to start matching them. So for some of you guys that have done a SWOT analysis, I don't know if you did matching, but in this way here, it's another level of analysis. It's another level of critical thought. So not only are you just listing these things and just leaving it as it is, Now we're actually listing them and looking at them to see whether or not we can create some sort of match to them. So here's what we do. We try and match our internal strengths with those external opportunities, and we place those matched events or those matched factors into an SO category. And then I'll show you how it works on this 9 cell that's going to be shown here in a little bit. And then we list our internal weaknesses and those external opportunities. We try and record those in the weakness opportunity strategy, the WO strategy. We then also match our internal strengths and our external threats and record that in the strength threat category. And then lastly, we look at the internal weaknesses and the external threats, and we record that in the WT strategy. Here's what a SWOT matching matrix looks like. Right there. We've got our strengths listed. We got our weaknesses listed. And in this particular case, we only had 3 weaknesses. We got opportunities, and there were only 4 of them out there. And we've got our threats listed. And let me see how many threats we had. We had 5 threats out there. Now, you notice we're not matching everything. We're only matching those things that fit. And here's the way it works out. You notice in these different boxes, these are those strategies. This is the strength opportunity, weakness opportunity, strength threat, weakness threat strategies. And in here we have 5 that we could list. Now, the way we list this is simply this. Strength goes first. So strength 1, unique product, matches with opportunity 3, a merger or an acquisition. So we can use this particular strength here and use that strength for this opportunity of mergers and acquisitions. Strength 2, we have access to capital. We can also use that strength in those 2 same opportunities. Strength 3, high quality. Well, we can use high quality with mergers and acquisitions as well. Strength 4, technology. Well, technology, we can use that with that changing social positions out there. And then lastly, the company image can also be used with mergers and acquisition. So all of our strengths in this particular case work out real well with the opportunities that are found out there. The only one it doesn't seem to work out with is relocate the business. Now, over on weakness, it looks like there's only one area that matches, and that would be manufacturing costs. There's our weakness. But that would match with 2 opportunities, relocating our business and mergers and acquisitions. And then when it comes to strengths and threats, we have 3 that have matched: high quality, technology, and company image. All of them match with new competition. So those 3 things can fight or mitigate the threat of new competition. Here's a big one. This is where we're weak and there's a threat that can take advantage of us. And this is one of those things the firm has to work on right away. Those decision makers have to be able to identify that if we're weak in an area and there's a threat out there that can take advantage of our weakness, they're going to do that at some point in time. So we need to do something to at least reduce that threat or mitigate that threat. In this particular case, we have high manufacturing costs and poor marketing. And the threat out there is number 4, new competition. They can take advantage of our high manufacturing, and they can take advantage of the fact that we've got poor marketing costs. All right, that's called SWOT matching. Does anybody have a question on that? And you notice that this way of looking at the SWOT is a bit more in depth, a bit more critical thinking, a bit more analytical in looking at what it is that we've identified and how those identified items can be used to either solve a problem or create an opportunity. Does anybody have any questions having to do with the SWOT matching? Are we good? All right. All right. Well, I'm going to take us 2 more steps and then I'm going to let you guys go. Okay. Now we've matched these things. That's good. But we know that some of these factors that we matched, the firm is going to want to work on them before some of the other factors that we match. There's going to be a priority that's going to be set with this. And so further development then of the SWOT is called the confrontation matrix. And that really is nothing more than prioritizing those particular factors. So we got our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats, and you can see these are the matched areas. And the areas that have a 3 with a circle on them, those are the ones that we would work on first, high priority. Secondly, we would work on the ones that have a 2. And lastly, lowest importance would be the lowest number would be a 1. Those would be those low opportunity, low strength types of things that we would work on. So this now what it does is prioritize those matched items. One last area that we look at from the SWOT analysis is called the impact probability matrix. Now with this one, all we're listing is the external factors, the opportunities and threats. And all we're thinking about is 2 variables, probability and impact. What's the probability of it occurring? And if it does occur, what kind of impact is it going to have on the firm? That's all we're looking at on this one here. But again, the information comes from the SWOT analysis. So an impact defined then would be the risk and size of that impact based on what kind of cost it's going to be to that firm and the impact on that firm or other critical factors that we would consider or list. And then probability is whether or not that particular event might occur. Here's the way this one looks out. Again, it's 2 variables looking at impact and probability going from low to high on both of those factors. And again, all we're listing here is the opportunities and threats. That's the external areas that we've determined in our SWOT. So you can see we've got here increasing fuel price. That would be a threat. Recession's a threat. We've got shift to internet sales. That's an opportunity. New manufacturing technology, new opportunity. Low cost rival, threat. All right, let's take a look at this. If we do have increased fuel prices, the probability of occurring is low. And the effect on that firm or the impact on that firm is also low. If we have a recession, the impact on the firm would be high, but the probability of a recession is going to be low. Low cost rival entering the market. Well, probability is mid-range and the impact on the firm also would be mid-range. So kind of a moderate type of event that we should be looking at. Now we've got some opportunities here. Shift to internet sales. If we did this, if we pursued this particular opportunity and shifted to internet sales, the probability of occurring, first of all, we can do it. We got the resources to do it. So the probability is high. And the impact on the firm would also be high. And the other opportunity we have here is new manufacturing technology. We can do that. We've got the resources and capabilities to do new manufacturing. So probability is high and also the impact is high. Now, if you're a manager, if you're the decision maker, you're only looking at this particular area of this graph. Oops, let me bring that back. You're only looking at these items in that top right-hand side. You're not concerned about this stuff down here. You're not really concerned about this stuff in the left-hand side because it's a low probability. Main concern are these items right over here in the top right-hand side. And we didn't have anything that was high probability, low impact, but that would be one of those other items that we really wouldn't have much concern on as well. All right, so that takes us then to the positioning matrix. This is what we're going to be looking at next week. So we will be picking up our lecture next week having to do with the positioning matrix. We will finish off chapter 2, and there's a lot to do on chapter 2 next week. So hopefully we'll be able to get it all done. If we can get it done in time, then we'll kind of move on over to, excuse me, this is chapter 3. We'll move on over to chapter 4, which would then be the internal analysis of the firm. All right.